Good afternoon. Welcome to Forthright Solutions Spotlight Series. I'm Kristen from Forthright, and we're thankful for your time today. Every month, we showcase a different solution from our trusted technology partners that solves the challenge or problem we're seeing in the industry. And this month, we're featuring Citrix, specifically their NetScalers or ADCs with pooled capacity. If you have any questions at any point during the webinar, just please either hit the little raise hand icon on your screen or type a question into the chat, and we'll be sure to answer those questions. If we can't get to them right away, we have time allotted at the end to answer everyone's questions. So from here, I'm going to pass the microphone over to Steve from Forthright, who's going to share some information with you about what we do. So take it away, Steve.
Thanks, Kristen. Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to start by thanking you all for joining us this afternoon on our Spotlight Series, our Solution Spotlight Series. I'm Steve Zoberg, COO at Forthright. And for those of you who have joined but haven't worked with us before, I wanted to start with a quick brief, just a brief 2-minute intro. We've got a lot of great content today, so I'm not going to take up too much time. You know, Forthright's been helping clients optimize their application delivery for decades. And for us, it's not just about the tools and the various technologies that you use. It's really about how do you supercharge your end user experiences. So we built an entire practice around being very user-centric in everything that we do. Now, what does that mean? That means that our passion, our focus, well, it's not centered around the different tools or technologies or even processes that are optimal for us, but rather, how do we put ourselves in your shoes? How do we pay very close attention to the experiences and outcomes of your end user population? Now, what's interesting is over the years, we've recognized that most of our clients fall into one of 3 different categories. Some need consulting services around strategic initiatives or prototyping new technologies, and others need additional resources, right, from day-to-day operations, or maybe they're implementing a new project. And some, our third group, basically want to reduce their operational costs, and they focus on their core business. So they look at Forthright and say, listen, can you help take over the responsibility of specific technology sets? Regardless of where you fall with your organization, we've got 6 core service offerings that address these needs, and some customers will address and they'll leverage 1 or 2, and some actually use all of these services. So if you're interested in finding out more about anything that you see, please reach out to us, call our office, or send us a quick note at success@forthright.com, and we would love to talk to you. Now, on to today's focus, today's spotlight conversation. Well, it's focused around your Citrix admin and engineer as an end user, right? We want to talk about their user experience. What's it like to do their job? And so the question for today is, how do we deploy Citrix NetScalers on-prem or in the cloud or both, right? And we ensure that we can simplify the various management tasks that you have. We can provide an increased agility to your business, and we can minimize the budget spend of while you're doing it. So to discuss these use cases and the many advantages for pooled capacity licensing, I'm going to pass the presentation over to Nick and Rich from Citrix, and they're going to shed some light and actually a lot of great information and a demo on these topics. Guys, take it away.
Okay, perfect. Thanks so much. I definitely appreciate Forthright giving Nick and I the time to kind of go over something that's relatively new that Citrix is offering compared to everything that we've done with the Citrix NetScaler prior to this. So we're going to go ahead and kick this off. And, you know, I think we can all agree that there have been some fairly significant changes taking place in IT, you know, 2, 3, 5 years ago. These changes are fundamentally changing the way that organizations have traditionally done business. The word cloud, the word microservices, and software-defined everything is literally forcing companies to take a look at application delivery in an entirely new manner. Now, with so many companies looking to make that transition from an on-prem data center into a hybrid or multi-cloud model, what they're also looking for is a low-risk, low-complexity migration strategy just to be able to ensure that they can keep their business continuity strategy going while still creating business value for their respective organizations. And, you know, back not too long ago, there was plenty of hesitation about this move to the cloud. There was security concerns. There was concerns around control. There was concerns around the amount of visibility that was going to be given over those applications. But I think that most enterprise organizations today are much more confident in the level of security that's being offered, as well as high availability capabilities that are being offered within these cloud providers. Then we take a look on the economic side of all this. Moving to the cloud now allows companies to basically eliminate that substantial upfront CapEx investment of those traditional hardware appliances, and instead simply replace them with an OpEx model that has a much more predictable monthly or annual fee. Being able to optimize cost based on usage is a much more attractive financial model, especially during these unpredictable times where we find ourselves, where capacity needs to be allocated quickly. And as a result of all this, most organizations today are beginning the adoption of technologies that allows for the automation of ordinary tasks across multiple devices all at once. This includes lifecycle management as well as provisioning. Because when you start to employ a multi-cloud strategy, what that means is now you're supporting applications that are now being deployed in several different data centers. That could be both a public or a private cloud. And this involves complex operational processes. And a lot of you guys should be rightfully concerned about this move. Even a little bit of a loss of control and visibility of your applications could potentially happen with these workloads to the cloud. So that's why a lot of companies today are searching for a solution that can give them granular visibility of their entire multi-cloud infrastructure. They want to be enabled to be able to provide the ability to easily monitor, identify, diagnose, and troubleshoot any issues that come up, and they want to be able to resolve those issues quickly. So in comes Citrix. We realized that with the changes, with all of these changes in the way that applications are being delivered, we also needed to usher in an all new license requirement for our NetScalers or for our application delivery controllers, just so we could accommodate the organizations who are beginning the process of migrating applications and workloads to the cloud. That old way of licensing ADCs, it was rigid, it was inflexible, and it just wasn't feasible in today's software-defined hybrid multi-cloud world. Because most of those traditional ADCs had fixed capacity, they were fixed capacity network appliances that provide zero or minimum expansion capability beyond their original capacity. So that means that customers had to purchase maximum capacity appliances on day one because they were unable to determine how much capacity they were ever going to need at any particular given time. And as a result of this, the majority of the time, those huge application delivery controllers that they purchased that were in place running in the network, most of the time the throughput and processing power was never even used. I mean, you talk about an underutilized investment. So enter Citrix's pooled capacity. This is the solution that's helping customers support data center automation, as well as helping ease that transition to the cloud. So if you look at the traditional perpetual licensing model, like I said earlier, the licensing capacity is locked into a specific platform or appliance, and it can't be moved, even if that system isn't even being used. So Citrix introduced pooled licensing to address this limitation, because now capacity and licenses are decoupled from the underlying platforms and are managed as a single shared pool. So in this particular example you see on your screen, you have the ability to take the 130 gigs of throughput off of the individual appliances and allocate all of that capacity to the pool. Then you have the ability to dynamically assign instances and throughput to any ADC at any time, regardless of where it's located, whether that's sitting on premise or in a private or public cloud. And the fact that poll question that Kristen asked earlier said that the majority of you have 7 or more ADCs, this is something that you guys should be really, really interested in. We have what's called a single code base across all of our platforms. What that single code base means is that our pooled capacity licenses can be used by any Citrix form factor, whether it's a hardware platform, such as the MPX or the SDX appliances, or whether it's a virtual appliance like the VPX, the CPX, or even our bare metal Linux appliance, the BLX. The licenses can be used in on-prem deployments or in the cloud with services like AWS, Azure, or GCP, or in a private cloud. So what that does is that actually gives you guys maximum flexibility and license portability across your entire ADC product line. And what's great, and Nick is going to talk about this a little later, and he's going to show you a demo, all of this is managed from a single management console with our application delivery management. So let's discuss really quickly some of the immediate benefits of moving to a pooled licensing model versus your traditional perpetual model. And by design, this entire licensing structure provides you with ultimate flexibility. It provides you with the flexibility to move the capacity where it's needed. And you also have the ability to monitor every single one of those instances, its bandwidth, its CPU usage, and that gives you the knowledge to be able to add bandwidth or virtual CPU capacity wherever it's needed. And this entire process can even be automated with APIs. And when moving to the cloud, it's extremely difficult for any organization to really predict how much capacity you're actually going to need. With this type of flexible licensing model, it allows you to avoid the over and under provisioning by letting you dynamically allocate capacity to wherever it's needed most. And look, all of the benefits of this licensing would be totally lost without a really easy, simplistic way to manage it all. ADM, which is our application delivery management, that is your single pane of glass for managing this entire pooled capacity infrastructure. Basically, what the ADM does is it acts as the licensing server and gives you guys a set of robust tools, such as the license dashboard. What the license dashboard does is it actually gives you a snapshot of what capacity has been deployed and where it's actually been deployed to. You can also run this tool to help you automate migration from one location to another. In today's COVID times, I'll give you guys an example. If you have an application running in your on-prem data center that needs to be moved to a public cloud quickly in order to be able to support a surge in work from home traffic, now you can use that ADM to simplify that migration of that ADC config from the on-prem device to the new instance that's sitting in the cloud. And speaking of business continuity, I mean, we're all living this every day, aren't we? During unforeseen events like this, or like any unforeseen event, we all find ourselves or any company, application demand is going to fluctuate. It can fluctuate wildly at any time, go up or down. That's going to put a huge stress on your overall infrastructure, which in turn is going to affect the way your employees experience getting their applications. But with the pooled licensing framework, if an unforeseen event does occur, you guys have the ability to increase the capacity of those individual ADCs from the throughput that's in the pool. Or even if you need to, you can even provision new ADC instances from the instance pool as you begin to move these workloads in between on-prem or different clouds. And again, all of this is done as simply as clicking on a license and allocating it to an ADC instance wherever and whenever you need it. So let me show you guys some visual animations on the 3 common use cases for pooled licensing. I'm kind of a visual guy, so I think you guys might understand a little better seeing how this actually works. And the first case that I wanted to touch on simply centers around capacity portability. So in this example, we have 2 hardware appliances at site A with a total of 60 gigs of throughput available. And then at site B, we have 80 gigs allocated between the hardware and the virtual appliances. So between the 2 sites, there's a total of 140 gigs of available throughput. But like we previously discussed, in the past, each of these appliances would have that fixed amount of bandwidth tied to those physical or virtual appliances, and that's it. And you're not going to be able to move that anywhere. But with pooled capacity, again, you would simply subscribe 1, 3, or 5 years to a pool of throughput and a pool of instances. And instead of having that throughput spread out over those static appliances, it's simply in that subscription pool. And if you guys do prefer to keep your hardware appliances in your on-prem data center for reasons such as SSL encryption and decryption, or you guys have other really compute intensive jobs that require hardware versus software, you don't need to repurchase expensive hardware appliances again. Because now what you would do is you would simply upgrade what you currently have to what we call zero capacity hardware appliances. These zero capacity appliances are the ones that will allow the throughput and the instances to be easily portable between your on-prem data center, back into the pool, or up into the cloud, or back on-prem if needed. So now the existing processing capacity can easily be shared and transferred across all of the ADC form factors, regardless of where they're located. And all of this is done from that centralized location using ADM. And of course, when the ADC appliances no longer require those resources, it just simply returns them back into the pool for other ADCs to be able to use somewhere else within the network. So now the second case I wanted to touch on centers around cloud migration and the ability to bring the Citrix NetScaler or the ADC to the cloud along with the proper amount of throughput as you move these applications. So now with the zero capacity hardware, number one, you're reducing your hardware investment on-prem. Now you have the freedom to be able to move all the throughput on-prem and the instances to wherever it's needed based on networking traffic. So from the pool of 300 that you purchased, allocate 200 to the data center. Let's allocate another 50 gigs to the cloud. So now by decoupling the software from the underlying hardware, this is what allows the software licenses to be easily portable, enabling you to bring your own capacity to the cloud, regardless of where that ADC is located or what form factor it is. And in this particular case, you can see that they moved all of their throughput directly from their on-prem data center into the cloud to move that capacity in tandem with the applications. There's a lot of use cases here that you guys could be considering, and we can have that conversation at another time. But in the interest of time, the third model that I kind of wanted to discuss is critical for any organization out there that may have data centers that are geographically dispersed, whether that's across the state, across the country, or in this particular scenario, across the globe. So this company had 300 gigs of throughput in their pool, and they chose to disperse 50 gigs to each of their 4 data centers. And with pooled capacity, this company now has the ability to automate provisioning of bandwidth that is maintained inside of that centralized depository. And they can do this across all of the ADC appliances worldwide. So now with this follow the sun automated throughput allocation, it allows this particular company to not have to purchase those maximum capacity appliances across all of their data centers, which is a far more efficient way of using their entire ADC infrastructure. And we are leading the way. Citrix's ADC, and if those of you who are familiar with the NetScaler, you know that we've been in the Gartner's Magic Quadrant back when Gartner had their Magic Quadrant for 10 plus years straight. We are truly the most comprehensive application delivery and load balancing solution for monolithic and microservice-based applications out there on the market. With all of the changes happening today that we've already discussed, organizations all over the world are looking for ways to remain flexible and agile while still being able to easily manage any infrastructure, any cloud, or any application. And our ADC is the solution that truly is leading the way. We have over 40,000 customers worldwide that are already recognizing the value of our application delivery controller. That includes 3 of the hyper cloud providers, IBM, Microsoft, and AWS. Each own over 10,000 Citrix ADC appliances running in their data centers, helping to manage those complex environments. And when it comes to security, we are the ones that are going to be able to provide holistic application and API protection. And what that means is that regardless of where your applications are deployed, there is no need for added infrastructure, thus eliminating that operational complexity. Also, you no longer even need to worry about upgrades or patches because what this does is it ensures that the latest available protections are automatically available. And look, don't take my word for it. I think Gartner summed it up best in their latest ADC market guide report, where they discussed several of their key findings when evaluating the market and ADC vendors overall, when they said Citrix is the ADC that should be considered for all opportunities worldwide. And look, not many people know this of Citrix. Most people know Citrix as a virtual apps, desktops, and remote access company. But we are a strong networking company with over $1 billion in networking business when you combine our networking offerings of Citrix ADC and our SD-WAN. Out of that $1 billion, the majority of that, truthfully, is our application delivery controller. And out of all of ADC sales worldwide, 40% of all ADC sales is pooled capacity licensing. My last slide here before I kick it off to Nick for a demo on what our application delivery management console looks like. I thought it was really important for you guys to understand the options that are given to you when it comes to our ADC subscription licensing. There's two options. The first is pooled capacity, which is what we've been discussing throughout this entire presentation, but there is also vCPU. And just to clarify, the pooled licensing is based on the bandwidth consumption by the instances and can be used across all ADC form factors, whether that's a physical or a virtual appliance. But with the virtual CPU-based licensing, this addresses some of the compute-based requirements for our software-based appliances. So this does not apply to the MPX or the SDX. So to put it simply, what this licensing model does is it provides you with a number of virtual CPUs that can be shared among Citrix ADC instances. So by focusing on the CPUs instead of the capacity of the instance, this greatly simplifies the way you can actually size your ADC environment for both the cloud and as well as on-premise, because by unlocking the capacity of the vCPU on a virtual appliance, bandwidth limits on that instance can be lifted to just unbelievable levels. And because this model is based on the number of CPUs that you're actually consuming and not based on throughput or SSL capacity, this is the most popular model that organizations are going to when they're moving their workloads and applications into public clouds like AWS or Azure. And that is the end of my presentation. So I am going to hand it back to Kristen to hand it off to Nick so he can go over application delivery management.
Yes. In the meantime, does anyone have any questions?
Hey, Kristen, so we gave people the opportunity to ask a question when they registered for this webinar, and I wanted to make sure we addressed those. One of which is, can I leverage pooled capacity licensing with my existing Citrix on-prem NetScaler?
So Matt, the quick answer to that is yes. And you say on-prem. So if your existing NetScalers are the VPX, the virtual appliances, you already have the ability to move those instances from on-prem into the cloud. The only thing missing here from a pooled capacity standpoint really is the subscription pool that you would need to purchase in a 1, 3, or 5 year subscription. Now, if you own legacy hardware appliances and you want to be able to keep that hardware in your on-prem data center, yes, you can absolutely take them and trade them in and purchase that zero capacity hardware because the zero capacity has no instances or throughput on them and generally goes for about 1/3 of the cost of what those initial NetScalers went. So if anybody has any refreshes coming up or any maintenance renewals, believe it or not, the money that you've already allocated for your maintenance renewal, you can probably get into a pooled capacity a type of a solution without having to spend that much more. That's the reason why so many organizations, 40% of all sales is going to pooled capacity.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you. There are a few more questions. We'll get to those.
I have a question
Okay, good.
here. Mike said, but we have a conversion SKU for non-EOL HW to convert. I'm sorry, I might be not understanding the question. Does that make sense to you guys? And then
I didn't hear the question.
it says we have a conversion SKU for, oh, it was a statement. Okay, I'm sorry. It wasn't a question, it was a statement.
Okay.
I have another question. Is there any limit on the number of VPX appliances we can spin up within the same subscribed pool capacity?
Nick, you want to go ahead and take that one?
Yeah, no, actually, you're actually limited to the number of licenses that you have, not the number of instances, VPXs that you have. That's a great question. It's all dictated by the licenses that you have on the ADM as a service.
Okay,
Which you'll be showing us here in a few minutes.
Absolutely. Thank you.
great. Then you can go ahead and, why don't you go ahead and start your demo then, Nick, and we'll see if anyone has any more questions, just please throw them out there.
Appreciate it. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. So I want to jump right into the application delivery manager and go into the pool capacity dashboard. So what you can see here in front of you is that we're displaying the 3 different editions of ADC that we have available to us: standard, advanced, and premium. Depending on the edition of license that you have, that will dictate what features you have available to you in the ADC. Looking at this dashboard, we can see that on the standard, we have a total of 10 gigabytes worth of licensing. On the advanced, we have 50, and premium, we have 500. The other important fact is that it tells you the utilization of those license files. So currently, we're not using any standard licensing. We have 35% utilization on the advanced, and only a 1.2% instance utilization, actually bandwidth utilization on the premium. If you look over to the right, here it says the number of instances. So for every bandwidth license you have, you also need an instance license when you're working with the virtual capacity. With that being said, you might be asking yourself, well, okay, I've got the advanced licensing. How do I know which ADC instances are leveraging that license? Well, if you click on the percentile here, it's going to populate all the instances that are currently using those license files. Now, for the sake of this demo, we've labeled the host names to let you know which cloud provider the instance is installed on. So we have Azure and AWS in this instance. Over in the IP addresses, this is the NSIP addresses. This is the management IP address that allows you to access those instances. Under the type, it tells you that they're all virtual. And here, the important part is the allocation capacity. Now, as you can see, they all have between 4.5 and 4 gigabytes of bandwidth allocated. So that's great. Now, we're talking about the ease of use. How do we assign these licenses? How do we reallocate those license files? Well, if you go under Action, and you click on Action here, you're going to see on the top right corner, Change Allocation and Release Allocation. So if you click on Change Allocation, you're going to get this window here. Now, here we have the option of selecting which edition license file we want to choose. We can see that we have a total of 50 gigabytes worth of licensing. We're using 32.5, and we've only allocated this amount. To modify that, simply change that number and click Allocate, and that license file has now been allocated to that instance. So that's pretty simple there. Now let's just say that you want to release those license files because you want to reallocate all those license files to another instance. Go to the Release Allocation, and it gives you a prompt. Do you want to release those license files so that you can reallocate them? And you'd select yes. And that's it. That's full capacity at its most complex level. Now, that's all great on the dashboard. What are we talking about on the actual ADC instance? So if we go over here to the ADC instance, this is how easy it is so that you can get started. Under the Configuration tab, under System, there's an option for licenses. And in the licenses, we can see that this has already been allocated a pooled license files. It's got 100 megabyte bandwidth, and we're using the Platinum Edition license file. If you click on Manage License Files, you can see the same options below here. And then you can also change the license files as well from the ADC. So you have the option to do it all from a single pane of management or from the instance. To show you how easy it is to change, you just click on that, the same thing as the ADM as a service, select the number, get licenses, and that's it. that's as quick as it takes to change the licenses for pooled capacity licensing. It's really easy to use. And that's just one feature of the ADM as a service. One of the great features that you can also manage the actual ADC instances from this single pane. Now, what you're seeing in front of you, this is a tabular view. Again, we using the different nomenclature here so you know what instances we're working with. So we have Azure, on-prem, and AWS, and then we're also utilizing the microservices. Now over here under the score, this is a mean opinion score. It's color-coded so that the orangey yellow means that it's under review, and on the green, which I like to associate green as good, that means that it's up and running, doesn't really need too much attention. Under the max count, it's going to give you the biggest max contribution to the score. It's going to give you a reason why the score is so low or so high. So under the green, we got configuration drift, which means that there's some configuration changes that were made, but they weren't saved. And then here you can see that it says high disk usage and so forth and so on. All the way, and if you scroll all the way right, it tells you if you're also running a standalone, high availability, and so forth. Then you can see the features, the versions, how much throughput's currently being utilized. Everything is available within this tabular view. If you don't quite like this tabular view, maybe it's a little information, you can navigate over to the what we call the circle pack. The circle pack is the same thing. It's color coordinated, so you know if it's under the needs review or if it's up and running. It's great. If you select the one that's under review, you're going to see around the circle everything in bold that's going to emphasize what needs attention. So if you hover your mouse over the SSL config, it's going to say there's 2 certificates that need attention. So let's go ahead and find out what needs attention, which certificates need attention. So you go ahead and select that instance. It's going to populate that menu that we saw in a more detailed fashion. And then on top, there's a tab view called SSL. Now under the SSL, it's going to show you all the certificates that you have available to you. It's going to show you if they're self-signed certificate or if they're public certificates, the key strength, and the protocols in use. So currently it says that we have 2 certificates in play. They are going to expire in 90 days. So that's not an issue. However, if you look on the self-signed, there's both of those certificates are self-signed, which means that it's not very secure. So we need to update those certificates. Now here's the beauty behind ADM. You can select that option there, select the certificate, click update, and you can upload your new certificate directly from ADM as a service to that instance. You don't need to manually go over to the ADC instance, upload the certificate, apply it to the virtual server and all that stuff. It's all done from this management plane. Again, this is all simplified so that you can view everything from here. Another great feature that was brought up is the autoscale group. Now, autoscale group basically comes into play, especially when you're looking at the OpEx model. What we're looking at is that you can set thresholds and parameters for your ADC instances. So if we're working with CPU, you can set it to 70% utilization. If we reach that parameter, we can provision a new instance without you having to manually go in there and configure that. If it drops below a certain parameter, let's say you set it to 40%, it will decommission that instance without you having to manually do so as well. This is all done in an autoscale group within the ADM as a service. If you want to look more at the entirety, your entire environment, not just a particular instance, you can come over to this menu option, and here you're going to see the SSL dashboard. And here you're going to see all the certificates in the entire environment. So we see here that we have a total of 36 expired certificates. To manage them, again, just click on that link there, and you're going to see all the certificates here that have expired. It's going to tell you which instance they belong to, and then again, the host name and what the issue is. To update them, again, just click update, and you can update that certificate. If you've also come across some issues where you need to link a certificate because your users are getting a certificate not trusted, you can also select the certificate, select action, and you can link the intermediate certificate just by a click of a button. We also know Citrix for the virtual apps and desktops. Now this is where the analytics comes in. If you're using the gateway and if you're using your applications, published applications and desktops, there's a feature called HDX Insight. Now, for those of you who have worked extensively with the ADC, when you're troubleshooting issues, how many times do you have to try and look through comb through the log files to find particular users that are exhibiting the behavior. Or if a ticket is open and help desk calls and says, so-and-so user is having latency issues. Well, everything is populated in this one window. Over here, you're going to see the users' names that are connected. You're going to see the return trip time, the WAN latency, data center latency, all displayed in a single tabular view. If you want to have a more of a granular view and you say, okay, well, the issue occurred on a certain day, you can navigate to that analytical menu here, and it will populate this graph here. And then if you want to pinpoint the issue at a particular time frame, just hover your mouse over and you can see the ICA RTT time, and it can help you troubleshoot the issue, isolate it down to find out where the issue is at. If you think that the issue is on the client side, well, then we have the client side retransmit. Just merely click on that feature there, and it's going to populate this graph here. And again, if the user says, well, during the nighttime, I'm having these so-so problems, well, you can take a look at a more granular fashion. And again, hover your mouse over, and you can see the number of transmits that are occurring so that you can pinpoint the problem. Now, all of this is available on the ADM as a service. The great part of this is that if you don't want to view it in this particular platform, you can pipe that all out, push that all out into third-party log files like SolarWinds, Splunk, and so forth, so that you can view that at your own leisure. That's the HCX Insight. If you go with the Gateway Insight, here you're going to populate all the users that are accessing the VPN, and then it's going to tell you a graph here that's going to show you basically number of users that are connecting and the time of day. So why is that helpful? That graph is helpful. Oh, it just populated a lot. I apologize about that. So that graph is helpful because if you're reaching peak hours and you're not sure what time frame that those peak hours are occurring, this graph is going to show you everything there. It's also going to show you the IP addresses that they're connecting to, their client IP address, and the ADC instance. Everything here is available for you to view so that you can have that comfort knowing that you can see when the issue occurs, be proactive as opposed to reactive, and help ease the use of those users that are connecting. A great feature of the ADM as a service is that you can do something called role-based access control. Now, the role-based access control basically provides you access to certain features. In other words, if you want certain users to have access to view HCX Insight or Gateway Insight, you can give them certain rights and permissions to only view those features. You can limit them to say, I only want to have read-write access or just read access. You create the user or a group. This is all tied to Active Directory, and you assign them to a role based on the permissions that you want to give them access to. And that's it. That's all you have to do to assign those roles. I've been hovering over the application, but I haven't quite gone in there. Applications in the ADM as a service is synonymous with virtual servers. The ADM as a service is great for monitoring your ADC instances, your pooled capacity licensing, but if you also have virtual servers that you want to monitor, you can also have that done here. Now, this is also color coordinated, which is the great part. So you don't have to spend time trying to find out which of those virtual servers need attention. And as you can see, we go from critical, review, good, and not applicable. Now, the not applicable doesn't mean that something's wrong with it. It could simply mean that it hasn't been configured, that you started the process, but you haven't finished it. Otherwise, if you hover your mouse over the target application, it can tell you, okay, the state is down. Now, one of the great features of the ADC is that you have the low balancing capacity. So this could mean that one of the virtual services that you have bound to that virtual server is in a down state. So you can click on an application and delve in further. Now, some of the applications are named virtual servers. I'm sorry, I'm going to be switching back and forth. They're actually named for what they are, Exchange server. Others are just going to have the low balancing virtual server. Now, this is just to give you an idea of what kind of applications we will be working with. If you want to view on a grander time period, you can have this drop-down menu here that allows you to select from 15 minutes preset time all the way up to a month. Now, all these options here are available because I'm leveraging the premium license file. and that goes back to the pool capacity licensing. If you have a standard license file, you can view up to an hour worth of data. If you have the advanced, actually, I'm sorry, I believe if you have a standard license, you can view up to 1 day's worth of data. If you have the advanced license, you can see up to 1 week's worth of data. And if you have the premium license, you can view the entire month worth of data. Now, this is important, especially when you're looking, reviewing some of the past issues that occurred, and you can see if this is a trend or if this is a pattern. The ADM as a service is great for machine learning and pattern recognition. This allows you to be proactive when you're working with an environment that requires a lot of attention when they have a lot of virtual servers or they have a lot of virtual apps and desktops. We also have orchestration. Now, orchestration comes in, especially when you're working with microservices, so CPX. This allows you to leverage those microservices all again from a single pane. It allows you to create clusters. You can provision or decommission those microservices depending on the configuration that you have done. So these are some of the major features of the ADM as a service. Now, because I'm very technical, I'd like to touch up on a little bit on what we call configuration jobs. Now, again, for those of you who work extensively with the ADC as whether it's a hardware or virtual instance, you're going to come across issues whereupon you can't do the work during business hours. This is where configuration jobs comes in. You can configure a job, a maintenance job, if you will, and schedule it to be done at out of office hours. Simply either choose an existing template, and all you have to do is create a job. You can choose an upgrade if you want, whether it's standalone or high availability. You can do an autoscale group, which is based more on clustering. And these are all the features that you can select, and then you can schedule it to be done at a later time period. Now, we do work with configuration templates, as I mentioned, and these are the ones that are available here. We also work with something called Ansible and Terraform. If you go to a website called GitHub, those templates are available for you to use, and they're constantly being updated by our developers. And they're constantly encouraging me to let you know that if you are working on that, to upload your own so that they can have more of a resources, so they can work with them and work with you to customize it better to your need, if you will. So under configuration jobs, if you click on create a job here, this is a great feature as well. You have this configuration source. And the one I'm going to be talking about is something called record and play. If you click on record and play, a GUI of the ADC instance will appear and allow you to do the necessary configuration you want and store it and schedule it for a future date. So if you want to create a new application or virtual server, if you want to bind a new monitor, if you want to upgrade a certificate, but you don't want to do it during business hours, this is the feature that you would do. Upon recording and play, you will see that the template will be displayed on the right-hand side, and then you can click on that and select the instance that you want to apply it to, specify the variables, and then you can execute it now, or you can execute it at a later time and you can schedule it. These are all available functions with the ADM as a service. Now, I'm running a little bit quick on time. So a quick thing to note is when you're working with ADM as a service, you do need to connect to an agent. Now, the agent acts like an intermediary device between the ADC and the ADM as a service. So for the ADC to communicate to the ADM as a service, it has to go through the agent. Now, one of the questions that came up recently is, how many ADC instances can I connect to an agent? Well, I haven't come across a limitation, but it's based on zones. So I've seen 6 or 7 or 8 instances connected to a single agent. And then you're going to go, well, I've done that. How do I verify which instances belong to which agent? So you click on that agent, you click on view details, and it's going to populate the instance that's associated with that agent. If you want to add a new ADC instance to an agent, simply click on the setup agent here, click on get started, and then you're going to be presented with these 2 views. Currently, smart deployment is only supported with AWS. Smart deployment basically means a pre-configured template. So it will deploy the agent for you. For those of you who have worked extensively with the cloud, it will create a virtual private cloud for you. the subnets for you, and it'll do all that configuration, and it's basically made for that quick access. Everyone else, there's a custom deployment, which is a little bit more manual configuration. And here you can see that we support AWS, Azure, Google Cloud Platform, and on-premise. For the sake of this demo, I'm going to click on on-premise and click next. Now, this is where you're going to install the agent. You have the option to install it on a hypervisor, as a microservice, or directly on that ADC. So I'm going to select the hypervisor. It's going to say, which hypervisor do you want to install it on? It's going to present you all of these options. Once you install that image, it's going to populate, ask you for an IP address, ask you for the service URL, the activation code. You're going to click register the agent, and that's all the work you need to do. And that's it for the ADM agent. You can then add instances now, or you can add instances later for the ADC part. But it's as easy as that to configure. All right, so I'm going to pause there for a little bit to see if we have any questions that have come up.
Does anyone have any questions? You can type them in the chat or use the raise hand icon.
Hey, Nick, there were a couple other questions I wanted to bring to your attention. Do you only monitor virtual apps and desktops?
That's a great question. So that is a big part of the ADM as a service. However, we also manage the virtual servers, the applications that I brought up before, that manage the back-end services. So if a monitor comes up and says, one of your back-end services is down, the ADM as a service will alert you, and you can create SNMP alerts, which will send an email out to the administrator, let them know, along with actually monitoring the ADC instances themselves. So we do both. But thank you.
And then one other question. How do you differentiate yourself from the cloud provider's ELB, which I believe is an acronym for Elastic Load Balancers?
That's a great question. I'll let Rich.
I'll go ahead and tackle that, and that is a good question. I mean, look, first of all, let me say that there's a lot of things that the cloud providers do well with their ELBs, such as ease of use and elasticity for customers. I mean, look, all a customer needs to do is just check a box, and voila, they have a load balancer provision for them. You know, and not to mention, you know, all of these cloud providers' load balancers have really deep integration with all of the other services that they provide in their respective clouds. But you know, obviously there are some drawbacks by just allowing the cloud providers to provision their you know, their ELBs for you. You know, I know it used to be like this, and Nick, you can keep me honest here. I know that, you know, AWS, for example, didn't have support for any of the enterprise protocols. I know that they had support for HTTP, HTTPS, and TCP, but they did not support any of the other enterprise protocols, and that could be a huge you know, issue for a lot of customers. You know, there's no way to use ELB on-prem, and there's also no way to use it in any non-AWS data center. It's proprietary only to them. So if you have workloads existing in multiple clouds, the ADC that you have provisioned in AWS is not going to let you know what's going on in your data center or what's going on in GCP. Of course, ours will give you that full holistic view on how everything is performing across your entire multi-cloud infrastructure. I know that, again, Matt, my apologies. I know this used to be the case, but it used to be they also did not support multi-factor authentication, and they had no backend authentication with layer 7 applications. And then I think one last thing that I'll say that I know is true is you need to take a look at the granular level of visibility and metrics that we provide with everything that Nick just talked about here with ADM versus what the cloud providers are offering. They only provide a very small number of metrics in order to gain visibility and provide those alerts of service health. Any additional metrics that anybody needs is going to incur added cost, or it's going to need to have a third party. So there's a lot of things that we do in regards to visibility, control, and security that the cloud provider's ELB just can't match.
And I did have one other question. Is this flexible licensing, does that apply to any other Citrix products? I think I know the answer, but I decided to throw that out there.
So the ADM as a service works with the other Citrix networking products, but the flexible licensing pooled capacity, it applies only to ADC currently. We don't offer it with any other networking products.
Okay, great. Any final comments from any of our panelists before we wrap this up? Okay, so if there's no more questions, I just want to say that we will be reaching out. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I do have a question. Here we go.
Okay.
Do you have to buy licenses, both licenses, ADM and ADC or ACD? Wait, I can't think of the right acronym. Oh my gosh, my brain. Do you have to buy both licenses pooled for the ADM and ACD?
That's a great question. Rich, I'll tackle that if that's okay.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Excellent. So with ADM as a service, it's a free product. To make use of the flexible licensing, you have to purchase the pooled licensing. So if we go on the networks and licenses, these are the type of license files that you'll need to purchase. You have to purchase the bandwidth license, the instance license, and depending on the type of bandwidth you're utilizing, you'd have to purchase virtual CPUs as well. That's only for the flexible model. If you want to use applications or virtual servers, then that will require virtual server licenses as well. So the feature itself, ADM as a service, it's free. If you want to test it out, there's an evaluation option that you can leverage, ADC Express. The ADM as a service will give you 2 virtual servers to work with, and you can test it out. Otherwise, you have to go through those models.
Question about ADM as a service. Does it replace on-prem ADM?
You can use one or the other. We presented ADM on premises for the option of the users that are not, the customers that are not quite fully fledged into the cloud. They are one and the same.
If anyone has any more questions that we didn't get to, please feel free to reach out, success@forthright.com, and we can answer any questions. But like I said, we will be following up with you, so you can reach out at that time too. So on behalf of the teams at Forthright and Citrix, I'd like to thank you for your time this afternoon. Thank you for joining us at this month's Solutions Spotlight, and we hope to see you at a future event. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to our panelists.